Welcome, everyone. Good evening. It's on. Sorry. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for Senate District 2. My name is Nancy Ulrich. I will be the moderator for the forum this evening. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Morgantown, Monongalia County. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit organization, which means that we are unbiased. We do not favor any political party or entity or any political candidate. We will be on a tight schedule because there's a forum immediately after us, so I am going to start into the proceeding, into the forum, if I may. I first would like to start by introducing our candidates. We have on your right, Mr. Hayhurst, and on the left, Mr. Clements. Okay. They are both running for the office of Senator for District 2. Okay. I would like to welcome the candidates and thank them for participating in this forum. And I would like to jump right into this and get the ball rolling because of our time situation. So this will start by the candidates each giving an introduction to the audience, to the voters, and that will be 2 minutes each. Following the introduction, we then will go immediately into questions that I will be asking. We will alternate, when we change questions, we will alternate the candidates. You get 2 minutes for each response. As this is a forum and not a debate, there will be no rebuttal. There's no scheduled rebuttal. So after I have completed my questions, or we come close to the end of our time, if we're trying to save some time so we can take some questions from the audience. And audience, you will be given a card, which you will write your question on the card, and then it will be given, someone will pick it up if you pass it to the end of the row, and we will ask the questions at that time. Is Autumn sharing any of the slides? Is Autumn going to share any of these slides, or should we just skip? Okay. So, Mr. Clements, would you like to give your introduction at this time?
Thank you very much. I'm Charles Clements. I'm a candidate for the state senate from the 2nd Senatorial District. I grew up in southern West Virginia, graduated from Scott High School in Madison, West Virginia, and attended West Virginia University and graduated in 1966 with a degree in mathematics from WVU. I was commissioned as second lieutenant, and I spent 2 years in the military, and then after I left the military, I spent 7 years in the reserve program as I worked in my own business in New Martinsville, West Virginia as a wholesale petroleum distributor. I worked there until we closed our business in 2004, and then I became the office manager for H&R Block in New Martinsville. In the period of 1994, I was elected to the West Virginia House of Delegates and re-elected in 1996, and then was out of the political arena until 2017, when Kent Leonhardt, who was elected as Agriculture Commissioner, vacated his seat, and I was appointed to serve the rest of his term and was elected to a full term in 2018. I am married to my wife Jeannie, who is here with us tonight, and we have 2 children. I have a son that lives in New Martinsville and a daughter who is a teacher in Roswell, Georgia. And I look forward to returning to the Senate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Mr. Hayhurst, would you give your introduction, please?
Sure. Good evening, and I want to thank the League of Women's Voters and the NAACP for putting this event on. My name is Eric Hayhurst. I am a resident of Morgantown. I grew up in a small town called Folsom in Wetzel County. I am a product of public education in West Virginia. I am a graduate of Valley High School in 2001. In Pine Grove, I went to WVU for both of my degrees. First, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, 2005, and then a 2009 graduate of the College of Law. Since that time, I've been spending my career as an attorney representing mostly individuals in various capacities, but mostly individuals who have been injured in some way. In 2017, I left a larger practice and opened my own law practice here in the Morgantown area. I represent individuals all across West Virginia in various capacities. I live here in Morgantown. I have a dog named Baxter, and this is my first time running for office. I've never put my name on a ballot before, been very politically involved, working on campaigns before, but never put my name out there. The reason I put my name on the ballot this time is because I'm concerned for the future of West Virginia. I see us heading in the wrong direction in many ways. Number one for me is public education. I feel that public education is under attack in this state, and children like me, folks who grew up in rural areas, rely on public education, rely on that school system, the school system to educate them. It's also, by the way, the number one thing that businesses look at when they come into a state. I'm also very concerned about our infrastructure, particularly broadband. We have not increased our capacity much in that way, and we need to do that to build a 21st century economy. So I'm here tonight to answer your questions. I look forward to that, and I also look forward to being elected to the Senate on November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayhurst. I would like now to share with you the format. I know we earlier discussed it, but I'd like to tell you again about the format that we will have during this forum. Following your introduction, we will proceed with questions. I will ask the question to you. You will have 2 minutes for a response. We have sitting in the audience a timer that is going, can you hear me? You'll have a timer who will hold up cards that will alert you to where you are in your response. As I am following the questioning, when that question's answered, then we will alternate candidates in asking the second question. If at any time you can't hear me or don't understand me, please ask me to repeat it. I'm having a little trouble with my voice tonight, but so please ask me to repeat it. Okay, so the other thing is, as I had explained to you earlier, that this is a forum, not a debate, so there is no scheduled time for a rebuttal in the forum. Okay, so we're going to start with the questioning. So, Mr. Clemens, we'll start with you, the first questioning. In September, the legislature passed House Bill 302 to restrict abortions in West Virginia more than Roe v. Wade would have permitted. Voters are still interested in your position on abortion. What is your position on House Bill 302?
Okay. I voted for that bill, and there were reasons behind it. Now, I'm not an attorney, so we have to rely on the information that we receive from our staff attorneys and other attorneys within the legislature. First of all, let me say this. I believe in protecting the unborn. I have been contacted by both male and female constituents who say that bill went too far, and some say it didn't go far enough. I'm a firm believer that we can't be inhumane to mother or child. I would never want to be put in a position where I would have to make a choice between my wife and an unborn child. There would be no question about that, which way I would go. If we failed to do something with that law, there was an injunction by the circuit court in Kanawha County that prohibited the law that was on the books from taking place. If that injunction were lifted, there would be no abortions, period, under any circumstances. There needs to be humane, but yet there needs to be protection for the unborn. I supported that bill, and I will continue to support it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clements. Mr. Hayhurst, what is your position on House Bill 302?
If I were in the Senate, I would have voted against the bill, and here's why. I, like Mr. Clements, agree that there should be exceptions for rape, incest, and life and health of the mother, and for the unborn child, for that matter. The exceptions that are in that bill are illusory in nature. It's what we lawyers call things that aren't actually in reality. They're illusory. They don't really have any effect, and here's why. The time frame we can debate about, the 8 weeks, the 13 weeks. But the issue is, in order for a rape victim to have an abortion, they have to have some report. They have to go to the county sheriff or the city police department or something of that nature to provide, to report that rape, and that has to be given to a physician. Well, that bill doesn't describe in detail or mandate that any police officer in the state of West Virginia provides such a report. As a lawyer, I understand that when a crime is committed, those reports aren't released for months, if not years. And if you have an ideological police department or sheriff, they may never give a rape victim that document. So the exceptions that are in that bill are entirely illusory. More to the point, we also have in most of West Virginia, in many parts of West Virginia, I should say, a OBGYN desert. This bill will make that even worse because although it removed the criminal penalties for a physician providing an abortion against the law, it's still the administrative penalties remain. That standard to prove that by the Board of Medicine is far less than it is a criminal standard. So you leave that to the whim of an administrative board that can prove that to what's called a preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not. So the exceptions that are in that bill are illusory. I would have voted no. We need to work on a better bill.
Thank you, Mr. Hayhurst. Mr. Hayhurst, I'm going to direct question 2 to you. West Virginia has a crisis in our foster care system. Too many children in foster care, too few qualified workers to investigate child abuse and neglect, salaries too low to attract qualified professionals, and a shortage of attorneys to act as guardian ad litems. What solutions do you support?
It's a very difficult question, or I should say there are very difficult answers to that question. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I have all the answers. But what I can tell you is this legislature has done little to nothing to fix the problem. If I go to Charleston, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. We're going to and get to work to try and fix this issue. It's a major issue. You're right. We don't have enough workers. We don't have enough lawyers. We don't have enough homes to put the children in that need to be home. And it's a circular problem. We start with opioid epidemic, which has largely created the issue in the first place. We need to fix that. That's where we have to start. This legislature has done nothing about it. They've done zero. There aren't easy solutions, but that's what the legislature is there to do. They're there to solve the hard problems. We need to find solutions to the opioid problem. That will help. We have to put more money into our foster care system paying DHHR workers better, to be able to attract workers, number one, and retain them. I've heard from DHHR workers on this campaign, they're able to hire folks, but they keep them for about a week to 3 weeks on average, because once they go in and find out the workload, they can't keep them. And you're paying them $20-some thousand a year to do this work that's very difficult, and not just difficult, but it's sad. It's sad work. It's no way to live, unfortunately, and they can find higher paying jobs in other areas. So we've got to put more money into the system. There was a foster care bill, which was decent, that was before the legislature this year. It created a dashboard and things of that nature. We need to work harder. We need to find better solutions. We need to talk to experts. This legislature is very fond of not holding hearings and not talking to experts. They just create bills and put them out there without talking to folks who actually know what they're doing. That's what I would do. I'd listen to people who are in the business and do what they ask us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Hayers. Mr. Clemens, do you need the question repeated?
Pardon?
Do you need the question repeated?
No. We admit and realize that the foster care situation in West Virginia is not the best. We have a lot of children that have been sent out of state, and a lot of the problem just comes basically down is people, for some reason or another, they don't want to take in the foster children, or if they want to take them in, they want to take them in because of a stipend that would go with them taking care of those foster children. As far as the Child Protective Services goes, we gave the DHHR the authority to take funding and stuff that was there for excess unfunded positions and give that to the people that were there to try to keep them. My granddaughter worked in the DHHR for a few months before she ended up she's now in South Korea teaching English, but she worked with CPS and would go to different places to try to see what's going on. But we're doing the best we can with the material that we've got. We've got the authority to give them the funding to try to keep these people. I want to tell you, from what I understand and talking to people, I would not want that job. It's a very difficult thing, and I think people, even if you paid them a large amount, it takes a special person to do that work. And I really admire and thank the people that are willing to do it.
Mr. Clemens, I'm going to address to you question number 3. In 2020, despite the pandemic, West Virginia had historically high voter turnout with unquestioned security. Turnout was enhanced by the availability of absentee ballots for every registered voter. Do you favor or oppose making absentee voting available to all registered voters who apply for a ballot?
I think that yes, if the absentee voters apply for a ballot, as long as there is some type of control, so that we know that when that absentee ballot goes to John Doe, that John Doe is the one that's voting and bringing it back. I do not favor just send out the ballots and send them back in. I do think we need to have some control on our elections. Remember, I told you I grew up in the southern part of the state. I've seen how elections work, and I like to see a little bit more security on those ballots. I think that because we have early voting, unless you have some type of physical impairment that would prevent you from getting to a place to vote early, I would favor extending the early voting period out to make sure people have the opportunity to come. But I feel it belongs up to them. It's up to the person to go vote. And we need to make sure that the votes that are cast are secure votes.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Mr. Hayers, could you respond, please?
Sure. Yes, I absolutely would support allowing, I think what your question gets at is no excuse absentee ballot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I support that. I mean, we've run elections in this country for couple hundred years. They're largely secure, and particularly on the national level or in larger races, there have been little to no races that were overturned or had significant issues of fraud in them. And I understand Mr. Clement's remark about Southern West Virginia, but that was 40 some years ago probably, and we've come a long way in this state. Our elections are secure in West Virginia and throughout the country. Oregon and other states just do all mail-in balloting. They've done fine, and they've figured out a way to do it where everyone has the opportunity to vote if they choose to do that. I think our system is good in the early voting. We could expand that a few days, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't allow folks to vote absentee, no excuse, if that's what we choose to do.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Hayhurst, I'm going to direct the next question to you. Should children K through 12, the education outside the public school system, be held accountable for student educational outcomes? Oh, I'm sorry, I did miss it. Thank you, Lindell. Question number 4 is up there, yes. Do you believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected President of the United States in 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Clements, how would you answer that?
I have to say yes. He was elected President of the United States.
Okay.
But do I think there were irregularities? That's very possible. Maybe not enough to destroy the election. Joe Biden is the President of the United States.
Okay. Now, question 5. Okay, so Mr. Clemens, this will be your question to start. Should children K through 12 education outside the public school system be held accountable for student educational outcomes? If so, how?
Would you repeat the question
I will.
again?
Should kindergarten through 12th grade education outside the public school system be held accountable for student educational outcomes? If so, how?
Yes, I think they should, and I have discussed this before. I feel that the students that are outside the public school system should meet the same standards, take the same testing as the students in the public school system. And that way they need to be held accountable. The people teaching need to be held accountable. I do not feel like that, well, we have a lot of homeschool situations that I question, but still, I think they need to be held accountable and meet the standards that we require of all of our students in this state.
Mr. Hayhurst?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I'm in this race. This legislature has been, for the last 6 years, under the Republican control, and we can check the voting records, but they have been reducing, the educational requirements to graduate high school in this state. They've reduced the number of credit hours that were required to educate high school in this state. They have opened up the Hope Scholarship and charter schools. Check those bills. They're unregulated. It's not regulated. They don't have to pass the same exams that our high school students do. There are no standards that those students have to abide by. So this legislature, controlled by the Republican supermajority, hasn't done that. In fact, if you are homeschooling, there's no accountability. You can take your child out of school and they can be taught. And the important part of that is, I'm all for, if you want to homeschool your child, that's great. I'm all happy for you to do that. But your child and other children need to meet the same educational standards that those in public school need to meet. Because what's going to happen, particularly with the Hope Scholarship, if they allow that, give you money to teach your children at home, the $4,300 or $4,600 that the student aid formula, and you teach your child, there are going to be a number of people who in this state who take their children out of school, take that money, and then don't teach them. And we're going to have a generation of students who are not just undereducated, but uneducated. That doesn't help West Virginia at all. You want to attract new people here, new businesses here, keep our young people here. The only way you do that is by having an educated population. And so this legislature has done everything that they can to reduce those standards. I will go there. I'll make sure we keep the standards and maintain our education in West Virginia.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ayers. I will now address this question to you. What is your position on permitting transgender kindergarten through 12th grade students to participate in sports aligned with their gender identity? You, Mr. Ayers. That's okay.
My apologies. So, you know, I think this issue has obviously been brought up on many levels, that there's been a bill passed in West Virginia dealing with this. Personal feelings aside, this issue, it's a social issue that is really, from my perspective, it's just being used to divide a wedge between the left and the right. That's all it's doing. It's not a problem in West Virginia. I officiate high school basketball and volleyball. Games, there's no issue. It's not there. It's just simply a divisive issue that's being brought up, particularly by the right, to try to divide regular West Virginians on this issue. And by the way, you know, there's a whole other world out there. And young people generally, I consider myself to be somewhat young, I'm 39 years old, they don't like this stuff. Is shove them right out the door. It sends them away, because all it says to them is that we're not welcoming to people who look, think, as a state legislator. Obviously I believe in climate change. I think it's evident. I think most people now agree that something is happening. Even the governor of Florida now kind of agrees with the last hurricane that came through, agrees that climate change is happening, and we're seeing increased weather events, not just the number, but the severity, the intensity of those things. So, West Virginia generally should be cognizant of that. And, to the extent we control any sort of energy policy, which there's not a lot of that coming from the state level, it more comes from the federal level, but we should be cognizant and try what we can to reduce, our greenhouse emissions so that we have a planet that survives, longer than we're here. We have to think about the future generations. We have a beautiful state, and we want to keep it that way.
Mr. Clements, would you respond?
Yes, thank you. I think we have done a lot, and of course, I sometimes question how much of this climate change is man-made. We have been cutting back on our emissions in this country, and yet China, India, and Africa are producing coal plants like you can't believe. We have done much in the state as far as saying, yes, we can build solar energy fields, farms in our state. We even passed a bill this last time that allows nuclear energy to come into the state before it was outlawed. And of course, I go back and look at the tremendous record that the Navy has had on their ships that are nuclear-powered ships in small containers. There can be small nuclear plants built everywhere that can cut down and have zero emissions. But I think one of the things that's happening is we're pushing this zero emission things before we have the technology and the infrastructure to support it. And that's going to be very difficult for us if we don't have our carbon-based energy to transition over time into what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Clemens, I'll direct this question to you. Some people suggest that good roads, a clean environment, and a skilled workforce may be more attractive than tax cuts to bring new businesses to West Virginia. What do you think?
I am a great believer in infrastructure. If you don't have infrastructure, you're in trouble. I think we've done so much in improving our roads, improving our work toward getting all of these bridges and things that are antiquated. If we have good infrastructure, if we have good schools, and I think we've got good schools, and I think that by people having a choice in education is going to attract people into our state. We can have good schools. Do we have good health care? Do we have good recreation opportunities? All of these things are very important in bringing people into our state. I live in New Martinsville. If a plant opens in Marshall County or in Wetzel County or Ohio in there, those people come in there, they got a choice. We can go to Ohio, we can go to West Virginia, we can come to Pennsylvania. They can go to any of the 3 states and still be living within the commuting distance of that. So we need to have those things that are attractive. But I said, the first thing people notice when they come into your state is your roads. If your roads are bad, you got trouble. And we need highways in our state. And I'm a firm believer in working toward that. But I'm also a firm believer in establishing good living conditions for all the people that want to come and live in West Virginia.
Thank you. Mr. Hayhurst.
I totally agree with the statement. This legislature tends to be focused on the tax cuts, however. We absolutely need better infrastructure. Interstates are fine. You go off the interstate, however, you can go right out here on 73 and the road's falling over the hill. The folks out there are extremely worried about it, and we have to build good roads everywhere, not just the interstates, not just the exchanges. We have to build good roads everywhere. Infrastructure is not just roads today. There's a lot of businesses aren't as much brick and mortar anymore as they are high-speed internet. There are areas in West Virginia that don't have high-speed internet, or the internet they have doesn't work half the time. You go to my parents' house in Folsom, it's off more than it's on. If somebody wanted to move there and work from home, couldn't do it because they don't have a good enough internet connection to do it. Streaming internet, you can't cut the cord. My parents have to pay a $250 cable bill because they don't have good enough internet to stream. All those things lead to good living conditions, good and attract business. Public education, under attack in West Virginia. This county alone stands to lose tens of millions of dollars through Amendment 2 and the Hope Scholarship together. Combine those two things together, stand to lose tens of millions of dollars through those two things this legislature is trying to do. You can't build, and this county, Monongalia County, has a great public school system. Think about all the other counties, the little counties, Wetzel, Tyler, Doddridge. If they're losing money from their budgets, how are they going to hire the teachers they can't already hire? How are they going to attract new teachers and new people there, new business? Absolutely agree all those things need to be addressed. This legislature isn't, and that's why I'm going to Charleston.
Okay. I'm addressing this question to you, Mr. Hayhurst. Some analysts suggest that last fiscal year's $1.3 billion surplus was caused by lowball revenue estimates, massive infusion of pandemic-related federal dollars, and failure to adequately fund existing state needs. Please explain your approach to managing a state budget surplus that may or may not be durable.
I agree with the premise of the question. A lot of that money is either from federal funds, the $1.3 billion surplus, or the 2,000 unfunded teacher positions in the state, the thousands of unfilled regional jail and other state agency positions, and then just not providing or just some what I would call funny math with the budget. In budgeting, you can make the budget look however you want to, and the governor's done that, and this legislature's done it. There's some money there, however, and we should use that either to, both fix one-time needs. There are roads that need fixed, repairs, maintenance to the roads. We have billions with a B dollars of unfunded maintenance or deferred maintenance on roads in the state. We should also, increase pay to the extent we can do it, and do it fiscally responsible to keep it in the budget for areas of need. Regional jail workers, there's a crisis in our regional jail, crisis in those jails. Also, we should give some money back to the taxpayer if we could do that responsibly and fiscally responsibly, and move forward with a budget that makes sense for West Virginia.
Okay. Mr. Clemens, would you respond?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have a surplus in the budget, and a lot of that budget as surplus money has come in from a flat budget. West Virginia has shrunk in population, but yet we don't need to continue to grow our government. We want to return that money to the people. And how we do it is the question. The Senate plan wants to do away with the tax on inventory, equipment, machinery, and vehicles, and that money would come from the state budget to backfill into these counties. And the counties are not going to lose money because of Amendment 2. They will continue to get the money that will not be coming in to them from direct taxation of inventory, equipment, and machinery. And I continually hear people say, well, that's only for big out-of-state companies. It's not. Most of these big out-of-state companies that come in have worked a deal with the counties that they're not paying these taxes anyway. But I've got a beer distributor in New Martinsville that pays thousands of dollars on his tax on his inventory. And it's for West Virginia mom and pop stores that have inventory. Anybody's got inventory pays it. How many of you deal with small businesses? They're everywhere. Yes, we've got a surplus, and yes, we want to return that money to the people in the state of West Virginia. Thank you.
Mr. Hayhurst? Oh, I'm sorry. I was so engrossed in the answers. Okay. Mr. Clements, I'm going to address this question to you. Amendment 1 would change the West Virginia Constitution to state that courts and judges may play no part in the impeachment process in the state legislature. Do you support or oppose Amendment 1? Please explain your position.
Well, let me say this. When the state Supreme Court got out of hand, first of all, you have to realize a couple of things. The state Supreme Court writes their own budget. They hand us a bill. We have to write them a check. We have no control over where they spend that money. They were not spending that money in a prudent manner and were actually being very reckless in the way they spent it. So we went to impeach them. Well, the House impeached them, and we sat as a Senate and tried one of the justices. And I will tell you, there were 34 senators there, and there were no Democrats or Republicans in that room. We were 34 senators doing our job. The justice that was tried was acquitted. But then when we were getting ready for the next trial, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, well, you didn't do something right, so we're stopping all of this. And we stopped. The only thing that this amendment is going to do, or what this amendment is going to do, is going to say that they cannot interfere with the impeachment process. Now, someone will say, well, they don't have due process. They get a fair trial in the Senate. I have sat in a fair trial, what was really a fair trial in the Senate. And I'm sure that if they have other problems, there would still be appeals into the federal court. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that there would be some type of recourse. Thank you. I do support Amendment 1.
Mr. Hayhurst?
Well, let's all think back to our high school civics class. We learned about checks and balances, right? This amendment would fundamentally alter the checks and balances in our state constitution. I'm a lawyer. One of the things that our founders of our federal constitution, the great genius of them, was instituting checks and balances. Every branch has a checks and a balance on the other branch of government. What this is trying to do is this legislature, again, trying to control, have all control. What this would do is not allow our state Supreme Court, which all Supreme Courts around the country, including our U.S. Supreme Court, I don't want to get all lawyerly on everybody, but it's called, there's a case called Madison v. Marbury, and what courts in our system get to do is interpret laws. They get to interpret what the law says and whether it's constitutional. What this would do is take away the Supreme Court's role, not just in their own impeachment, but in every impeachment across the board, in the executive branch, in the legislative branch. So, although I'm sure Mr. Clements tried to give the justices a fair trial, who's to say the legislature in 5, 6, 7 years from now is going to be fair in trying a case? That's what the checks and balances are for. A couple of things I wanted to go back to, just to correct the record. We passed a constitutional amendment last election that actually requires that the Supreme Court used to be able to write their own budget. They can't now. The legislature actually has to approve the budget. We did that a couple of years ago in our election, so that's incorrect. And then the other thing is due process. All that happened in the last impeachment process was the legislature wrote rules and then they didn't follow them. All the Supreme Court said, and it wasn't by the way, it wasn't the justices who were being impeached, it was a whole other set because they had to be appointed, said, no, if you're going to do this, you have to follow your rules. If you're not going to follow your rules, you can't do this. That's all this court said. The legislature could have just gone back and did it all over again and followed the rules. They chose not to do that. Now they want to change the Constitution. Let's not let them do that.
Mr. Hayhurst, I'll direct this next question to you. Amendment 2 would change the West Virginia Constitution to give the legislature the power to control taxes on machinery, equipment, and inventory for businesses and on personal property for individuals. Amendment 2 would not automatically lower taxes, and a plan to replace lost revenue has not been agreed upon. Do you support or oppose Amendment 2? Please explain your position.
I fundamentally oppose it, and here's why. What, again, this legislature is trying to do is put control of local county budgets, school board budgets in their hands. Again, this legislature might do the right thing, but who's to say a legislature in the future will do the right thing? I'm running for the legislature, and I don't trust the legislature to do the right thing in that situation. The money that these taxes provide to local governments are for education, overwhelmingly for education, for fire, EMS, and the vital services that local governments provide. The amendment allows the legislature to change, either to exempt or not exempt. That's all it does, is it allows the legislature to exempt or not exempt these classifications of property. By the way, I'm a small business owner, and I pay the business and inventory tax, also on vehicles. I pay that tax. Annoying? Yes, it is. But I also like having a police department that's going to show up if I need them, an EMS service that's going to show up if I need them, and a school system that educates. I don't have children yet, but I hope to someday, that they're going to educate my children and the children of my neighbor, who's the future of my economy. In the plan, the so-called plan, only the Senate has put forward a plan. Nothing's been passed. It's an entire proposal. The House doesn't agree with it, or at least they haven't put out a proposal of their own. And what would happen with the proposed plan is that, well, we maintain this flat budget forever. Is that really going to happen? No. It also assumes that they like to talk about, out of one side of their mouth, well, we've lost 100,000 people in the last decade, so we need to shrink the size of government. But this plan assumes we're going to gain hundreds of thousands of people over the course of the next several decades to put this money back in place. So which is it? It doesn't add up. We can't give this control up to the legislature. We can't play politics with this money. Too important.
Mr. Clemens, would you respond?
Yes. One of the things that has been mentioned all the time is if Amendment 2 passes, we'll shut down the schools, we'll shut down the fire departments, we'll shut down the EMS and everything. That's not going to happen. The money will be replaced into the counties by the legislature. The counties will have their budget. They will do their budget. The school systems will get their money through the school aid formula. The counties will get their money. And for most of the counties, it will be an increase in revenue. We have a lot of counties that are having a downward trend in their revenue. And eventually, they're going to have some bailouts. We've already had to bail out one county in West Virginia because of their revenue just left. Now, I bring up one thing that's always mentioned about that's this legislature and that's this program. In the 90s, we put our pension plans on a 40-year funding cycle. And every legislature, both Democrat and Republican-controlled legislature, has religiously taken care of that, and we will soon have our pension plans funded at 100%. Some of the best in the nation in our state, and we've stuck to it. The governor makes his revenue estimate. The first thing that happens is that the actuary says this is how much money that you need for the pension plans. That's put in there, and then the budget is built off of what's left after the pension plans are funded. That same thing will happen with the counties. They will not lose their funding, as a lot of people want to make you believe.
Okay, Mr. Clemens, I will address this question to you. Amendment 4 would change the West Virginia Constitution to give the legislature the authority to overrule or change any rules or policies adopted by the West Virginia State Board of Education. The Board of Education, an appointed bipartisan body with members approved by the legislature, opposes this amendment. Do you support or oppose amendment number 4? Please explain your position.
I support amendment number 4. I think one of the things that you need to look at is most of the regulating bodies within our state, the DEP, the Labor Department, whoever it is that writes regulations, those regulations go before the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee. That committee is made up of both Democrats, Republicans, House, and Senate. And what happens at that point is they can either reject the rules and send them back, they can modify them and send it to thing, or they can approve them. Then those rules are sent to the legislature in a rules bundle and are passed. And there's a lot of times that there are very controversial rules which are pulled out and voted on separately. Once the legislature votes on it, they become the effective law. That's true of every appointed body in the state except for the State Board of Education. Now, do we want to be in the classroom? I don't think that's what our objective is, but I told a story earlier today. I talked to a superintendent one time, and I asked, why do you promote someone from the 3rd to the 4th grade that cannot add and subtract? And the answer I got was, well, if we retain them then when they get to high school, they'll be old enough to quit school, and that will hurt our graduation rate. We need to graduate good graduating seniors. We don't need to just have a number to say we graduated 90% or 95 or 98% of our people. We have no control over what that is. If I had anything to say, the graduation rate would be done away with. It would not be a published item. But as someone said, do they talk about it? Because you can measure it.
Mr. Hayers?
Have we noticed a theme with these amendments? It's all about control in Charleston. The legislature wants to be a super legislature and wants to control every aspect of our lives. I don't want this legislature controlling the curriculum decisions that educators make in our state. We hear a lot from the right about politics in our classroom. Well, this is exactly what this would do. It would make decisions of our State Board of Education and educators trying to educate our children, facing obstacles that we can't imagine on a daily basis, from addicted, parents or children from, addicted families and broken up families, being raised by grandparents, trying to control them even further, and deciding what it is they can and can't teach, and what they should teach, and how they should teach it, and what curriculum is good, what curriculum is bad. Putting all that before a political body just makes absolutely zero sense unless you want to control the narrative, control the curriculum. We can't let this happen. Our education system has been independent, and it's independent for a reason, so that politics don't play a role in our classroom. I don't want my child or children or nieces or nephews or whoever learning one side or the other, right or left. That's for them and their families to understand. This would allow the legislature to create rules on curriculum and decide what my children, your children learn. That's not a decision for a political body. It's a decision for educators who know what they're doing, who've been trained to educate children in this country, and you should vote no on Amendment 4.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, that ends the questions that I have for you, and thank you very much. They were very interesting answers. We have questions from the audience. New Senate District 2 stretches from the Cheat to the Ohio. The Monongalia County portion has little in common with the rest of the district and has less than a third of the district population. I live near Cheat Lake and feel like a foreigner in District 2. How do you intend to effectively represent all constituents in a district so large and with such diverse interests? So I think you would start that, Mr. Clemens.
Well, let me say that is, yes, the second district is large, but not near as large as it was before. I had 9 counties in the second district, but reapportionment cut that down from 9 to 6. And I will say this, I spend most of my days working with every one of our counties. I have spent a lot of time in Monongalia County working with the people here to try to develop, particularly on the things that I can help with in the legislature. I have spent much time working on Exit 155 out here. I spend a lot of time working on Harmony Grove so that we can get that new milk plant up and running to provide the jobs that we need in Mon County that was lost when Milan shut down. I do not and will not feel like that I live in Wetzel County and that's the only thing I care about. I cared about all 9 of my counties, and I will always care about the 6 counties that I've got now because that's who I represent, these 6 counties. I know Mon County is a lot different than Ohio Valley is, but we still have a lot of things in common that we need to work on. This upper Ohio, or upper Monongalia, I guess I should say lower Monongalia Valley here in the Morgantown area is the jewel of the state of West Virginia. It really is. And I intend to work to keep it that way. Thank you.
Mr. Hayers, could you respond?
Well, I live and work here in Morgantown, and I grew up in Wetzel County, a little town called Folsom. So I know the differences well between what Cheat Lake's interests are and what the people of the Short Line, which is where I grew up. It's what's called the road between Clarksburg and New Martinsville, or actually the railroad between Clarksburg and New Martinsville is called, and we call it the Short Line. I understand those differences. I will represent them to the best of my ability in the state legislature. In the last 8 months we've been running this campaign, I've put 16,000 miles in my truck going back and forth. That will continue when I'm in the legislature. I work hard and I will represent everyone. And I will say, Mon County has the majority, not majority of voters, but the largest number of voters by county and individuals by county than any other county in the district, by a lot, actually. I certainly understand the diverse nature of the district and will work hard to listen to all of my constituents to make the best decision I can for each and every one of them.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think it's now time to give your closing statement. And as we said earlier, you have 2 minutes to give your closing statement. Mr. Clemens, would you go first, please?
Well, I will say that I have been representing the 2nd District now for 6 years. I've seen tremendous changes come to West Virginia in those 6 years. We have taken ourselves out of the judicial hellhole that we were in prior to that. We have brought new industry into the state of West Virginia and will continue to do so by getting rid of regulations and things that in the past have hampered our economic development. We passed a road bond issue to create better roads. We're working to expand this broadband into the whole state of West Virginia. Well, a lot of these things cannot happen overnight. They take time, but they're coming. I was out last summer into Minnehaha Springs. They're getting broadband. It's coming everywhere in the state of West Virginia. It just takes time. We're running fiber from Bridgeport, West Virginia to New Martinsville and back into 100. And so we're trying to make bring West Virginia into this century and look forward to the next. And the closing comment I have basically is, we cannot afford to go back to the way we were doing things before in the past in West Virginia. Or if we do, we will continue to slide. And I think that we have gotten to the point now that we have stopped the slide and are going to move forward. And West Virginia will become a destination, not only for jobs, but also for people. I thank you all for the opportunity to be here, and I would ask for your support in November.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Mr. Hayhurst?
Well, first I want to thank you, Mr. Clements, for being here this evening. I think it's been a good event, and I think you've seen the differences between Mr. Clements and myself. One thing I want to note is West Virginia, it's interesting this legislature likes to talk about we've moved West Virginia forward and whatnot, but we just lost 100,000 people. The census said we just lost 100,000 people. We lost a congressional representative in our federal government. We're not moving forward. When I came to college here in 2001, it's the first time I ever heard of cable internet. That was 21 years ago. Why don't we have cable internet in every corner of West Virginia today? It doesn't take that long to run some cable to fiber optics. We just haven't, this legislature is not focused on that. They've not put the money into it that needs to be done. We could do it, and we could do it very quickly. Infrastructure. Yep, we've built some interstates, we've built some exchanges, but go outside of those areas. The roads are crumbling. The bridges are in disrepair. You want to attract people to West Virginia, have good roads everywhere. We are taking money, millions of dollars away from our public schools. The number one thing, and they like to talk about tax cuts and taxes. And by the way, this legislature likes to harp on the 5 new big businesses that come to West Virginia. They all came here with the taxes that are in place. It's schools, it's infrastructure, it's the working population that they can, the working people that they can hire to work in their business. I'd also note most of those businesses are being built on the border. West Virginia can't afford, as Mr. Clement said, to move backwards. That's what we're doing. I'm running for this office to move West Virginia forward, and that's what I intend to do when I'm elected in November. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a really interesting forum, and we appreciate your attendance.
Ready? Which one am I? I think I know that. Ready? Good evening and welcome to the second forum. This is the forum for candidates for State Senate District 13. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Morgantown, Mon County, by the Morgantown Kingwood branch of the NAACP, and by the Community Coalition for Social Justice. The only thing we need to call to your attention on this slide is that early deadline for registration was today, so we're hoping everybody who's here is registered. And to note that the Westover VFW is not a polling place this time for early voting. They're having HVAC problems. So. On the screen here is just information about how to get an absentee ballot. And important contact information. If you have any questions, it's very easy to get to the Mon County Clerk, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with, or to the West Virginia Secretary of State. Our candidates for this evening for District 13 are Ms. Barbara Evans-Fleischhauer and Mr. Mike Oliverio. The format for the forum tonight will be that each candidate will have 2 minutes for introductions. Then we will ask a series of questions, which we will alternate the person who starts first. And then we'll have a minute and a half or so at the end for closing statements. We'll start our introductions with Ms. Fleischhauer.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the groups that agreed to sponsor this. It's nice to be here this evening, and I think that what we are partaking in is very important. Our government is based on an election process, and making sure citizens are well informed is part of that. So thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the Community Coalition for Social Justice. I am happy to be here tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I am married. I have 2 adult children and 2 grandchildren, and I'm an attorney. And I have been a member of the House of Delegates now for over 2 decades. I enjoy being in the legislature. I like solving problems and coming up with solutions. It's kind of like a mystery. Try to figure out how you can, what words to use to make things better. And I think everybody who's running for office and in the legislature, that's our goal, is to make a better state. And I think that my experience is helpful and my legal skills are helpful. And my work ethic, I think, is helpful. I think I'm one of the hardest workers in the legislature. My slogans are fighting for fairness, getting things done. And one of the reasons I ran in the beginning is I think that we don't have enough representation of women in our legislature and other underrepresented people. One of the things I'm most proud about in terms of getting things done is passing the insulin copay limitation. This in 2019, 3 years before Congress did. So I think my time is almost up, and I look forward to questions.
And Mr. Oliverio. Turn.
Test. Are we okay? Thank you very much. Dateline, September 28th, 2022, Oak Hill, West Virginia. The quick thinking of an off-duty nurse saved the lives of 2 West Virginia police officers on Tuesday night. WBOY first reported on Tuesday night that 2 officers were hit in the face with an unknown substance after a pursuit. Fayette County Sheriff Mike Friendly released the following update about the incident on Wednesday morning. Around 6 p.m. on September 27th, 2022, an officer with the Oak Hill Police Department stopped a car near C. Adam Tony Tires. When the officer was near the car, the driver and passenger ran away toward U.S. Route 19. The officer initially caught one of the suspects. When he did, the suspect reportedly attacked the officer. The other suspect continued to run. A second officer arrived to assist with the first officer. During the struggle between the officers, the suspect reportedly reached into his pocket and ripped open a bag believed to be narcotics and threw it into the faces of both of the officers. Bystanders nearby managed to stop and help the officers in arresting the subject when one of the officers suddenly collapsed and began to actively overdose. Shortly after, the second officer began to show similar symptoms. An off-duty nurse helped administer Narcan, which was what saved the lives of both officers. I suppose most of us believe that would be a crime. My opponent, Delegate Barbara Evans-Fleischauer, believes it is not a crime. The West Virginia legislature voted earlier this year 95-2 to make that a law. Delegate Fleischauer voted against that. What if that was your husband? What if that was your son? What if that was your daughter? I was trained to fight as an Army officer, and I will fight in this battle against fentanyl, and I will protect you and your family.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions now. These questions have been given to us from various organizations and individuals around the county. We will start by asking Mr. Oliverio.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I might be able to respond to that.
Not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I will call to everybody's attention that this is a forum, so we're really only answering questions and we're not having time for rebuttal. We'll ask this first question to start with Mr. Oliverio. In September, the legislature passed HB 302 to restrict abortions in West Virginia. Voters are still interested in your position on abortion. what is your position on HB 302?
That is a hypothetical question because I was not a member of the legislature when that issue was addressed. Had I been there, I believe with my leadership skills, the bill might have been shaped a little differently. But what I will say with respect to abortion is my position is very different than that of Delegate Fleischauer. While we both served in the legislature together, we dealt with the issue of parental consent. I believe that a parent should know and be able to consent for their young daughter to have an abortion. Delegate Fleischauer believed that parental consent was not necessary. I believed that informed consent was important, that if a girl or a woman were to have an abortion, they should be provided information as to the procedure and the details associated with it and the risks associated with it, and they should be provided information about the developmental stages of the unborn child. I voted for informed consent to provide information to women. Delegate Fleischauer voted against it. I voted to ban the practice of partial birth abortion. Delegate Fleischauer voted for that barbaric procedure, and the vote in the House of Delegates, there were only 2 people who voted to continue partial birth abortion. I would suggest to you that if the subject of abortion arises again in the West Virginia legislature, I will tell you I am a person who is pro-life with exceptions, and I will deal with the issue of abortion with great compassion and great understanding, and I will deal with it in a way very different than Delegate Fleischauer has dealt with it in the past.
Thank you. Ms. Fleischauer, what is your position on HB 302?
Thank you. I voted against HB 302, and Mike Strike, we have different opinions. I'm sorry. I voted against HB 302. I feel that it was overreach on the part of the government. I think that when it is in effect an abortion ban, and it is in effect forced pregnancy. And what I mean by that is the government is saying that women are incapable of making moral decisions, that they do not have the right to do that, and that the government is going to make those decisions about their personal autonomy, about their personal body, and they will not be allowed to make that. I think the exceptions to that bill are meaningless, and I think that's especially true when it's applied to my granddaughter, who is intellectually disabled. She would have to report that within 48 hours. She would she would not even know that she was pregnant and that she was going to have a baby. She doesn't really know, other than what baby dolls are, what it means to be pregnant. And I'm very concerned that that situation would be the same after she's age 18, when there would be an 8-week requirement that you would have to have your abortion. I think that I think that abortion is a very personal decision. It should be between the pregnant person and their health care provider. And I think HB 302 was government overreach.
Thank you. We'll start the answers to question number 2 with Barbara. West Virginia has a crisis in our foster care system. Too many children in foster care, too few qualified workers, salaries are too low. What solutions do you support to improve our foster care system?
Thank you for that question. Foster care is an issue that I've been working on for many, many years, and it is a difficult issue. And it's related to pay. Most of the people who are in Child Protective Service are women, and they have a very responsible job. I think that what I think about a lot is, you know, if I were a person that had seen a child with cigarette burns and then wasn't sure maybe if it was accidental or on purpose, and then I had to go home and make food for my family and do the things around the home, that would be extremely, extremely stressful. And that's why we have such an enormous turnover. It's a huge turnover. It's been a turnover for a long time. We did pass a pay equity increase a very long time ago, and we've had some smaller pay increases, but I think that's part of the problem. I think the opioid crisis is part of the problem. And I think that, it's a complicated thing, that one of the things that our government should be responsible for is the welfare of children. And so I think a much higher priority needs to be placed on foster care and on making sure that the system works. It doesn't get the attention that it deserves.
Thank you. And may I call you Mike? Okay. What solutions do you support for improving our foster care system?
For those of you that may have listened to me on talk radio in the past, this is something that I've talked about. I think that the foster care issue is one of our biggest problems in West Virginia. Nearly 7,000 children are in need of someone to love them and care for them. And we as a state can do a much better job than what we're doing now in providing that support. We have too many barriers in place for people who would make fit parents, whether it be for a short period of time or an extended period of time. We have too many barriers for people to be able to demonstrate that and become available. We create too many barriers when somebody initially begins to provide foster care, and we don't provide the necessary compensation for somebody to be able to deliver the care. I think that making foster care changes and developing it in such a way that we can meet the needs of these children will be something profoundly impactful for our state, because these children, if left without the support and care and love that they need now, they will have a lot of problems in the future. I talked to a good friend from southern West Virginia, and he indicated to me that there were multiple children in his children's classroom that were in foster care settings or had no one at all caring for them, and their family was helping provide support. So you have, from me, a commitment to drill down into this issue, find solutions, work with our DHHR and other agencies, and help these children along the way.
Thank you. Question number 3, we'll start with Mike. In 2020, despite the pandemic, West Virginia had historically high voter turnout. Turnout was enhanced by the availability of absentee ballots. Do you favor or oppose making absentee voting available to all registered voters who apply for a ballot?
I have written pages of election law in West Virginia. I doubt that there are maybe any other members of the West Virginia legislature who have written more election law than I have. And I'm of the opinion that the absentee process serves a very valuable role in enabling people who are simply unable to vote during early voting or during election day. And that generally applies to people who are in poor health. It also applies to people out of state and oftentimes out of the country. And of course it applies to my colleagues serving in the military around the globe. And that, for me, is the purpose of absentee voting. Beyond that, with the days that we have available for early in-person voting and the 13 hours available on election day, I believe we provide a suitable opportunity for people to vote, particularly those people who wish to take the time and learn about the candidates and involve themselves in the campaign. So absentee voting, for me, have it be early, give plenty of time for those ballots to be mailed out, people to vote the ballots and mail them back. I want the ballots to be received before the day of the election. If people turn in ballots, I only want somebody to be able to bring in 2 and then move into the early voting in-person period ending on Saturday before Election Day, and then a 13-hour election day period of time when, regardless of someone's work schedule, they likely would be able to vote.
Thank you. And Barbara, the same question to you. Do you favor or oppose making absentee voting available to all registered voters who apply?
I support that concept. I think that we had a great election in West Virginia in terms of participation and in terms of the lack of any discernible fraud. And I think it worked. It works in other states, and I think it was a successful experiment. I don't know why we wouldn't continue with it. And I also am in favor of voting by mail. Many states do that. We had a pilot project that I sponsored for voting by mail in the city and in municipal government. That was successful. That increased voter turnout substantially. And for example, Oregon has had it for like a decade or more. So I think that voting is really, really important. And we should not be discouraging people from voting. We should try to make it easier because we want people to participate in our government. We don't want to do things to make that people think that voting is in any way bad. Voting is good. That is the foundation. That's why we separated from England, because we wanted to vote and we wanted to decide our future. We wanted especially to make sure we had a say in taxes. So I think just the opposite of anything that would make it harder to vote. We should be. It has to be accountable. We need to check and make sure that people don't vote twice, obviously. But I think that we know how to do that in 2022, and we should just keep doing that. And I think it's a good idea. No excuse to absentee voting.
Thank you. Question number 4 starts with Barbara. Do you believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected President of the United States in 2020?
Yes. He won by millions and millions of votes, and there wasn't proof of fraud that would have in any way, shape, or form overturned the election.
Thank you. And Mike, do you believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected President in 2020?
I watched on television the United States Congress certify the election. So yes, he was certified. He is the president. And this election is about the failures of the last 24 months that he's been in office. The failures in which he's damaged our economic security, our energy security, our border security, and our national security. So this election is not about how the votes were cast or counted 2 years ago. This election is about the past 24 months of Joe Biden being our president, the 40-year high inflation that we're experiencing in West Virginia, the stress that that's putting on families in our state who are unable to simply buy gas and groceries. We're looking at the most expensive Thanksgiving Day dinner in the history of our country, and we are heading hard into winter, where we will have the highest heating fuels in the history of our country because of the failures of the Biden administration. My opponent is flying under the flag of that president, and I am not.
Thank you. Question number 5 starts with you, Mike. Should K through 12 education outside the public school system be held accountable for student educational outcomes? If so, how?
Well, when you look at the spending of the legislature, 50% of the spending of the legislature's general revenue dollars, approximately $2.4 billion, is spent on public education. So if there is not accountability over public education, you should fire 134 legislators. So yes, I believe there should be accountability. I believe there are plenty of models all across the country that can be used to create that accountability and recognize the achievement in our classroom. I would like to see a system where we reward teachers who achieve higher levels of success in their classrooms. I would like to see us promote opportunities where we have locality pay, where teachers who live in areas where it's very expensive to live, particularly during 40-year high inflation, where we're able to help with their costs through some form of locality pay. I believe we should incentivize teachers to go into difficult areas of the community and into the state that have academic specialties, particularly in the area of special needs. We need to do all we can to attract our best and brightest teachers into the areas where there are students who have special needs, who we can provide early intervention and help them turn the corner early and not fall further and further behind. But of course we need accountability, and that comes with legislators being engaged. It also comes from our 55 school boards, and we as a legislature should support those 55 school boards and all that they do, and we should support our state school board, enabling them to make quality decisions that improve the quality of public education in West Virginia.
Thank you. And Barbara, the question goes to you. Should K through 12 education outside the public school system be held accountable for educational outcomes?
So, actually, are you talking about charter schools and home schooling? Is that what the question is?
Yes, and I should have stopped you, Mike, but I will rephrase the question and we'll do it again if that's okay.
Well, maybe
Go.
he should, well, I don't know. I think that right now we are having problems post-pandemic. And I think it's really unfortunate that we have expanded options for families when everyone is trying to recover from the pandemic. I'm not opposed to charter schools. I'm not opposed to homeschooling, but I think right now what our kids desperately need is stability. I think, and they get that at public schools. And I think I think it's a really big problem. The Hope Scholarship and the charter schools are going to be siphoning money away from our public schools. And many of our most vulnerable children are not going to be going to private schools. They're not going to be going to for-profit private schools or non-profit private schools, and they are going to fall behind. And that's part of what public education does, is it's a level playing field where we can all do well. I'm very concerned about the lack of accountability. It is the laws that we passed are almost lacking in ways, and same with homeschool. Right now, you don't have to be a graduate of high school to be a homeschool teacher, and it's been that way for 5 years. And I think we even loosened the portfolio requirements that students would have to submit. So I'm really worried that there are going to be irresponsible parents taking this money and not making sure that their children are educated, and that we will not have the workforce of the future that we need to thrive in West Virginia, a well-educated workforce.
Mike, I'll give you just a minute to answer the question again.
Yes. Delegate Fleshauer said that stability only comes in public schools. I couldn't disagree more. She said you have to have public schools to have stability. We have very successful schools throughout the county, and we have hundreds of children being homeschooled who are in very safe and stable environments. I think parents should have a right to choose how they educate their children. I was appalled by Delegate Fleshauer's comments on WAJR and on Metro News when she said she was worried that mothers would receive the Hope Scholarship and they would spend that money on drugs. That is not the way I look at West Virginia mothers. I love my mother, I love my wife and the role she has played as a mother, and I know mothers would do what is in the best interest of their children.
Thank you. Question 6 starts with Barbara. What is your position on permitting transgendered K through 12 students to participate in sports aligned with their gender identity?
Thank you for that question. I think that is a solution looking for a problem. I do not think we have a problem that needs to be addressed, that the bill that passed in the legislature dealt with. I voted against that. I think there are repercussions that maybe some people haven't thought of. I think that young people are offended by the idea. Young people understand that many children are different from other children. And my child is different from other children. And I love her. And I want all children to be appreciated in schools. And I think not only are our children, this bill was an affront to many children, and they are going to vote with their feet by leaving, I believe. It is also going to be a problem to recruit companies like Google and Facebook so that we can diversify our economy, because their employees and their policies want inclusivity. So I think that it was an unwise move, and that's why I voted no.
Thank you. And Mike, what is your position on permitting transgender students to participate in sports aligned with their gender identity?
I think public school students who go through a process of transitioning need our love and support. Oftentimes they may need special counseling to help them through what must be a very difficult experience. I don't support boys who are transgendering competing against girls in sports. I didn't allow my son to roughhouse with my daughter, and I don't want somebody else's son roughhousing with my daughter either. We can create a level playing field, but it's not boys playing in girls' sports. And I think it's ironic, on the 50th anniversary of Title IX, that Delegate Fleischauer voted to allow boys to compete in girls' sports, potentially jeopardizing what was created over a period of 50 years, a period of equality, a period of opportunity, a period for scholarships, and to allow a change that could disrupt that delicate balance. And if you don't believe me, just go watch a pole vaulting match and see how far a girl can jump in the air and how far a boy can jump in the air. Go watch a swim meet and see how fast a boy can swim and how fast a girl can swim. There are hundreds of boys in America in high school who can run faster than the fastest woman in the world. And so to allow boys to compete in girls' sports doesn't seem like a problem today because we have very few in West Virginia, but it could become a problem in the future. And I want for the young girls of West Virginia the best facilities, the best opportunities, and I want a safe environment where they can compete and where they can win, where they can excel, and where they can receive scholarships to attend school at the next level.
Thank you. Question number 7 starts with you, Mike. What is your position on diversifying West Virginia's energy industry by allowing community solar facilities where a homeowner can purchase a share of a solar farm to produce their own electricity?
Really, on any of the energy issues, I subscribe to the all of the above theory. I think that we should allow people to pursue opportunities just like the Berkshire Hathaway opportunity that occurred earlier this year. Individual citizens, every form of energy, coal, oil, natural gas, hydro, solar, wind. We need an all of the above approach. I have supported that in the past and would in the future. I want us to continue to support our traditional industries, coal and natural gas, to provide a baseline of support so that we don't find ourselves like California or Texas in those desperate situations trying to provide electricity. So I'm generally an all of the above person, as long as it makes sense, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's property, and as long as it can be done in a way that's fair and equitable.
Thank you. And Barbara, what is your position on allowing community solar facilities where a homeowner can purchase a share of a solar farm to produce their own electricity?
Thank you for the question. I think that's a great idea. That is something that has been passed in other states, and I think it's something that we need here. And I think that we need to do more and more to diversify our energy sources. And obviously the sun is one of the ways that we can do that. I believe that global warming is real. I think the heat this summer was unbelievable, and I think the rain this summer was unbelievable, and obviously those people that live near in hurricane areas and that in the north or the south in the Arctic areas, that we are, the polar ice is melting. And I wasn't so sure when I first heard about global warming whether the catastrophes that they were predicting were going to happen so quickly, but they are happening as we watch them. So I think it's really important to do everything we can to expand the different types of energy we have. And so I think the battery facility, one of the things we have to do if we're going to be using solar is figuring out ways to store that, and I think that battery facility is a really interesting concept. I think we need to be making more batteries here, and so that we can be self-sufficient with energy in the future. And I agree that we also need our traditional industries to continue while we diversify all of these different sources. We've got wind, and I think community solar is a great idea. Thank you.
And the next question is kind of redundant now that I think about it, but it starts with Barbara. What should West Virginia do to address climate change and the increased flooding it is bringing to the state?
Well, I was listening to the news tonight about some people that were angry with FEMA over assistance that they were getting after wildfires in California. And it just seemed like it was pretty misplaced anger. Whenever you have a problem that's been predicted, I think the best thing to do is plan for it. And we have land use planning rules that you shouldn't be building on floodplains. I think our topography and the way that our homes have been built and our industries have been placed in the floodplains, I think we're probably going to have to change all of our floodplains, because we are having floods frequently that are of historic proportion and are, you just hear 100-year flood all the time. And so I think that we need to, our emergency preparedness really needs to be beefed up for things that have never happened before in the past. I think flooding is the most serious issue for us for climate change, but I think that we need to face up to that, and I don't think that is an issue that the legislature has really addressed yet, is what do we do with to help people deal with, recover from torrential rain and flooding. So I think that's an important issue that we need to work on more.
Thank you. And Mike, how do you think West Virginia should address climate change and the increased flooding it is bringing to West Virginia?
Thank you. I would hope that other legislators would follow my lead. We had historic flooding in our community, and I led an initiative to address the flooding of the Pompano Run and Burroughs Run. I coordinated an effort with city, county, state officials, both State Division of Highways and the state DEP. I worked with the federal government to help secure a loan, discounted interest rate loan from the EPA, and worked with a number of homeowners throughout the Burroughs Run and Pompano Run area. We worked with the university as they began construction of a new alumni center, and together we put together a $9 million project addressing the flooding concerns in Burroughs Run and Pompano Run. I left office, and for the next 12 years, the legislators in this area, the county commissioners, the city council, were unable to act on any changes. More blacktop was laid, more roofs were built, more water was consolidating, and we saw last summer the failure of continuing to act after significant repairs had been made. So what we need is we need active legislators, county commissioners, city officials, identifying the areas most subject to flooding, and then pursuing opportunities to address that flooding. One of the ways I pursued it was creating a stormwater utility where entities that create stormwater runoff could pay a fee, and that fee then could be used to purchase bonds to pay for construction. So I've done it successfully, and others came behind me and failed to make any changes or improvements as more blacktop and more rooftops came into play.
Thank you. Question 9 starts with you, Mike. Some people suggest that good roads, a clean environment, and a skilled workforce may be more attractive than tax cuts to bringing new businesses to West Virginia. What do you think?
I think tax cuts can help bring some of those things, certainly. I'll double check your list here again. Certainly, tax cuts that would bring business into the state and help existing business grow could create the dollars to provide some of the things you're talking about. But clearly, we are in a position in West Virginia where we have unparalleled surpluses, more surplus than at any point in the history of the state. And over the past 100 days, we have a half of $1 billion in new surplus. So we ought to be in a place where we can provide some of the improvements that you mentioned and enhance the quality of life for our citizens, and do that in such a way that people will want to stay here and others who come to visit will want to move here.
Thank you. And Barbara? Some people suggest that good roads, a clean environment, and a skilled workforce may be more attractive than tax cuts to bringing new business to West Virginia. What do you think?
I think that is probably true. We have cut taxes over and over and over again, and we have the Tax Foundation rates us as one of the best tax climates among all, or the best among all our surrounding states. Good roads, a skilled workforce, and a clean environment are going to require investments. And do we want to say that we are going to limit our ability to make those investments because we want to give business tax cuts or other tax cuts? I think I disagree about the surplus. I think it's an artificial surplus. I think the revenue estimates are don't square with reality. It's based on a temporary influx of funding because of the pandemic, and we would be using that funding not for dealing with the problems of pandemics, but to give out a big, what's being proposed is giving out a tax cut, 70% of which would go to businesses. I think the governor's idea about giving a personal income tax break on vehicles to is an okay idea, make it into rebate. I think that's much more fiscally responsible, because I think a permanent change like the that Amendment 2 would permit, and which people have, legislators have said they want to give, is dangerous fiscal policy. And so I believe that what we need in West Virginia, and since 1932, when we passed a road bond amendment, we need good roads in this state, and we don't have them. And that's going to take money, and we need a skilled workforce, and we need a clean environment, and those things cost money, for which a giant business tax break would make impossible.
Thank you. And question 10 starts with Barbara. Some analysts suggest that last fiscal year's $1.3 billion surplus was caused by lowballed revenue estimates, massive infusions of pandemic-related federal dollars, and failure to adequately fund existing state needs. Please explain your approach to managing a state budget surplus that may or may not be durable.
Well, I think I kind of answered that in my last question, but I am a fiscal conservative. I think that just like in your home, you don't spend money unless you're really sure we have it. And I agree with all of those things. I think we had lowballed revenue estimates and a failure. Actually, I can't remember. I didn't write that down carefully enough. But I think that what we need to do with that surplus is be careful. And there may be enough money for a vehicle tax rebate. I hope there is. But I think that we don't know what's going to happen with the stock market. Most of us who have our money, our pension money in the stock market, have seen large portions of it disappear. And this money that is in the surplus is also invested in the stock market, and it could dramatically go down. So I don't think we should spend it under these circumstances. And I just have to say that I think it's kind of ironic that my colleague was saying that that this is all about Biden. I don't think it's about Biden. I think it's about, this race is a state race. It is not a federal race. And we should be talking about the state issues, which have very much to do with the pandemic.
Sorry about that phone. It's new and it won't turn off. So Mike, the question goes to you now. Please explain your approach to managing a state budget surplus that may or may not be durable.
Well, if it walks like a duck and it squawks like a duck, it talks like it's a duck, right? I mean, we have a $1.3 billion surplus, and we brought in about $500 million more than what was to be spent the last 100 days. For somebody to say this is not the time to return dollars to the taxpayer, when would that time ever come? When would that time ever come if at this point almost $2 billion ahead of revenues over the past 15 months? I think we need to return dollars to our constituents. We need to help them during this 40-year high inflationary time. We need to help them with these rising gasoline costs. We need to help them with the rising grocery costs. Winter is coming, and this may well be the most expensive winter West Virginians have ever had, based on the cost of energy to fuel, to heat our homes and help us throughout this winter. So the surplus is there. We have to find some ways, I think, to get it back into the pockets of the people who put it there. And I would look for ways to do that if given an opportunity to serve in the legislature.
Thank you. I neglected at the beginning to say, if the audience has questions they would like to submit for us to deal with at the end, we're passing out cards. You can write your questions down and pass them to the end, and we'll ask them after we're finished. Question 11 goes to you, Mike, first. Amendment 1 would change the West Virginia Constitution to state that courts and judges may play no part in the impeachment process in the state legislature. Do you support or oppose Amendment 1? And please explain.
We have three branches of government. The role of the legislature is to decide if they wish to impeach a state official. It is the role of the House of Delegates to do the impeachment, and it is the role of the state Senate to conduct a trial. And it's my opinion that the legislature ought to be able to do that without interference from either of the other two branches.
Thank you. Barbara, do you support or oppose Amendment 1? Please explain.
Thank you. I oppose Amendment 1 and I voted against it. I think that, I agree that I agree insofar as that we have three branches of government, but I really don't think the legislature, and I was involved, I was the minority judiciary chair during the impeachment process. And what the legislature did, I thought was very wrong. The legislature brought charges against the third branch of government, all 5 members. There were some who I think committed some serious wrongs, but others, I thought it was outrageous to go after the entire third branch of government. And I think that is an example of what we shouldn't have happen. If you have, or for example, what if there's fraud? What if there were made up charges and people were challenged and there was no recourse whatsoever to the legislature's process of impeaching officials? And this would apply up and down. So I think that it's, once again, it's a power grab by the legislature. And I think that it is important to preserve the separation and the integrity of both branches, and so I'll be voting no.
Thank you.
All 3 branches.
Thank you. The next question starts with you, Barbara. Amendment 2 would change the West Virginia Constitution to give the legislature the power to control taxes on machinery, equipment, inventory for businesses, and on personal property for individuals. Amendment 2 would not automatically lower taxes, and a plan to replace lost revenue has not been agreed upon. Do you support or oppose Amendment 2?
I oppose Amendment 2. I voted against it in the legislature. I think it is a power grab once again. The current leadership of the legislature has indicated they have every intention of enacting legislation following passage of the amendment that would give a very large tax break to businesses. 70% of this would go to businesses, and it would have very, very dangerous effects on municipal government, on school government, and on county governments. Passage of Amendment 2 would give control of 27% of property taxes to the state legislature, when that has been in the hands of school boards and county commissions and municipalities. And it would end protection for the services that we receive. I'm especially worried about how it could affect K through 12 education. And because such a big part of that, 2/3 of property tax revenues fund K through 12. I've said earlier that I'm worried about public schools after the pandemic, and I would be even more worried for public schools if Amendment 2 passes.
Thank you. And now to Mike. Do you support or oppose Amendment 2? Please explain.
Thank you. This one's a tricky one because supporting or opposing the amendment and all of the things that people describe that would automatically be done if the amendment was passed are two very different things. By you as a citizen voting for Amendment 2, you are giving the legislature flexibility with respect to 6 areas of property taxes. By voting no, you're allowing the legislature to not have that flexibility. These taxes were put into place during the Great Depression, when West Virginia was in a very difficult place financially, and the voters cast their vote to put these taxes in place. Today, West Virginia's legislature is handcuffed by a 90-year-old vote of the people. And what I would suggest we consider doing, and it's up to each of you individually, I am just one vote. I'm not an author of this amendment. I'm one vote. But I would suggest that you consider undoing those handcuffs and giving the legislature the full flexibility of tax policy and spending policy. When we look at our neighboring states, we see that those states don't tax business equipment, business machinery, business inventories, and that puts West Virginia in a competitive disadvantage. So I would say to you as voters, it's your decision. If you want the legislature to have more flexibility, you should vote for Amendment 2. If you don't want the legislature to have that additional flexibility, you should vote no. But you should also know that the Senate plan, which is not guaranteed, the Senate plan calls for Monongalia County to receive a 25% increase in tax revenues should the amendment pass and should the exemptions change.
Thank you. The next question starts with you, Mike. Amendment 4 would change the West Virginia Constitution to give the legislature the authority to overrule or change any rules or policies adopted by the West Virginia State Board of Education. The Board of Ed, an appointed bipartisan body with members approved by the legislature, opposes this amendment. Do you support or oppose Amendment 4?
I've not taken a public position on this amendment. I would let the voters decide as they choose. I have told my colleagues in the legislature having additional accountability might make sense in terms of being able to approve rules and regulations. And I have also told my colleagues in the legislature, be careful what you ask for, because this could become a task of the legislature that could be very all-consuming should they enter into this. But understand that half of the dollars that the legislature appropriates, those general revenue dollars, half of them go into all the state agencies that run state government. And the other half of those dollars go to public education. In that half that goes to everything else, it is the legislature who approves the rules and regulations for those agencies. And that half that goes to public education, the legislature does not have any control over the rules and regulations. Those who argue against this tell you that by doing this, it would politicize public education. I would suggest to you, if you have ever been to a public school board meeting, you would see that politics is alive and well there already. But I've not taken a public position. I would allow the voters to decide, understanding if you want your legislature to be more involved, if you want to reach out to your legislature, individual members, and say, I object to this policy and I want you to do something about it, you should vote for this amendment. If you want your legislature to be hands-off on public schools, then you should vote against this.
Thank you. And now to you, Barbara. Do you support or oppose Amendment 4?
Thank you for that question. I'm opposed to Amendment 4, and Amendment 4. Is that? I voted against it in the legislature. I think, once again, it is another power grab by the legislature, and I do fear that it would politicize public education. I agree with Mike. I think there's a risk that it could be all-consuming for the legislature. If every single decision about education is going to be brought up during the 60-day session. I think that the system that we have with the school board and having the Department of Education be serving the State Board of Education members is working relatively well, and that I don't think we want to go to a system that is worse. So I think that it is not a needed amendment, and I think we passed this amendment not that long ago, and I think it was voted on the people. I don't think we need to reverse it.
Thank you. Those are our prepared questions. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
We haven't addressed Amendment 3
Oh, I'm
yet.
sorry, I'm sorry.
We haven't addressed Amendment 3 yet.
We didn't address Amendment 3.
It's on the ballot.
We don't have a position on Amendment 3. If
don't
someone
want-
from the audience would like to ask a question about Amendment 3, we can do that.
Well, we have 4 amendments on the ballot. You asked us about 3 of the 4.
Well, I think it's up to them to ask the questions, Mike. Isn't it?
I just didn't understand why. I thought maybe it was an oversight.
No, we didn't intend to ask a question about that.
Well, I support Amendment 3.
Here's the question from the audience. Watching the Mon County School Board last month, it was stated we hired 50 additional staff members with federal dollars. We face an $8 million shortage in 2024. In Mon County, Senator Clemens stated we are bailing out counties with lost tax revenue. Wouldn't that $1.3 billion be a handy fund for school for such things? Let's see, who started the last question? I think, Mike, you started the last question, so that'll go to Barbara.
Thank you. We're just one out of 55 counties, and $8 million is a large amount of money to be behind. And we really needed those 50 additional staff members during the pandemic, and I think we still need them. And I do think that I am very worried about public education, and I think we need an infusion to help our children get through this rough time. So I would say the answer to that question is yes.
And do you want me to repeat the question?
That's okay. I wasn't privy to that discussion earlier, but clearly we need to properly fund our public schools. I know that during this 30-month period of COVID, there has been substantial dollars that have been pushed toward public education, and as your state senator, I would advocate and fight for those dollars to improve the quality of our public schools. I am the product of public schools. I attended first grade to senior year here in Monongalia County in all public schools. I'm a product of a public higher education that was paid for by the Pell Grant. I understand the importance of public education and how it is the great equalizer that allows people to succeed, and I will be a champion of public education.
Thank you. And now we're ready for closing statements. And Barbara, you get to start. So a closing statement, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to be the first female elected to the state senate from either Monongalia or Marion County. I think that would be a wonderful thing to have happen, and I think I'm well qualified for that position. I don't think my colleague should be elected. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I think his position on women's rights and on our ability to make moral decisions on abortion is insulting, and that the government should not force us to make healthcare decisions or force us to see pictures of fetuses or force girls who maybe were raped by their parents to get permission of their parents to decide that they are not ready, or for whatever reason they are not wanting to have a child. I also think that his decision to be state chair of ALEC was misguided. That organization is a national group that is funded by big corporations, including the Koch brothers, that urges us to eliminate and limit regulation, especially of pollution. So, I mean, one thing we don't need in West Virginia is loosening of our water protection. And we've had some really serious environmental disasters in our state. And for example, the spill in Charleston. So I think that I am the most qualified for this position, and I urge you to vote for me, either early, by voting early, or on November 8th.
Thank you. And Mr. Oliverio, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. Delegate Fleshour's disingenuous comment about parental consent. Clearly, she knows that I supported a judicial bypass when West Virginia children were raped or incest was involved, where they could go to a court and obtain the permission for an abortion. She knows that. It's an effort on her part to misrepresent my record, just as she has done with fundraising letters and other techniques. I want to thank the League for hosting tonight, and I want to thank everybody that's come out. I want to thank those who are watching online. I was the ALEC State Chair, and I followed Joe Manchin in that role. He was the state chair before me, Democratic State Senator. He was actually the national vice president of ALEC while I was a member. So she can demonize that organization. She won't tell you that I was also a member of the National Conference of State Legislators. She won't tell you I was a member of the Southern Legislative Conference. She won't tell you about my work on the American Council, in which I went to Ukraine and Russia, where I taught classes on democracy and toured schools and churches and libraries, had meetings in the Kremlin, and learned all about Kiev. And the experiences I had there, I brought back to West Virginia, and I helped many legislators follow in my footsteps with ACYPL. She won't share those things with you. She wants to pick one organization that I was involved with and attempt to demonize me over my involvement with that. I've been proud to serve this community in the West Virginia State Senate in the past. If I'm given an opportunity to go back, I want to improve our roads and bridges, expand our broadband, diversify our economy, and fight for our fair share of funding from Charleston that we are currently not receiving under the leadership we have today. Thank you for your time and attention to tonight's forum.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate both of you for attending tonight and presenting your views and helping the League and our partners educate the public before they make an important voting decision. So thank you very much.